Gaiares!
It's pronounced Gaiares.
Crap, I've already uploaded the video. Hello and welcome to my 12th Genesis game review. If you haven't seen the previous ones, you can find a playlist in the description. At the end of all my reviews, I rate the game on a 1 to 10 scale, just like everyone else does, but my scale is a little bit different. I'm judging the game based on how fun it is when you go to play it today. It's a useful scale if you're looking for those games that have held up over time. So today it's Gaiares. It's a shoot 'em up, and it's hard to believe there was once a time where shoot 'em ups were being released on a monthly basis. I love the genre. I originally bought this game in 1991, and it totally annihilated me. I spent $59 on it, if I remember correctly. And I remember feeling really bad that I wasn't able to play all the way through it because it was just too difficult. This time around, I'm going to give it another chance. So here comes the review. Hopefully you enjoy it.
What differentiates this game from others in the genre is the weapon system. You start with a standard weapon, but can steal a different weapon by clamping a pod onto an enemy. You don't necessarily get a copy of what the enemy is firing, but you do get one of 12 different weapons. After getting a new weapon, latching onto the same type of enemy allows you to power up the weapon a couple of more times. You can sometimes upgrade your secondary missiles as well. Using the pod adds an element of exploration, as you are never quite sure what kind of a weapon a particular enemy is going to have. At least not until you play the game multiple times. Latching onto the enemies is risky, as every time you do, you can't fire any weapons at all. During those moments, you are much more likely to die. Speaking of getting killed, I died 124 times when playing for this review. I have average skill, so when it comes to shoot 'em ups, I'm not surprised when I'm unable to beat them. However, I was surprised that in this game I could barely get past stage 2. I think this is the hardest game I've ever played. The previous owner of the game must have thought it was difficult too, because they stuffed Game Genie codes into the game case. If you get hit once, you die. It'll then restart you at a checkpoint, which in most cases is very far from where you died. You get 5 ships before having to use a continue, but the continues are limited in number. There are shield pods you can get that give you the ability to take 5 hits, which will improve your chances dramatically. You'll need to interface with them to get the 5-hit protection. If you just run into them, you'll get a weaker shield. By the way, your own pod can also be used as a shield, so it's a good tactic to stay behind it. Like any shoot 'em up, pattern memorization will help you, but for this game it only helps a tiny bit. Almost all enemies, including bosses, vary the direction in which they shoot their projectiles, according to where you're positioned on the screen. You'll have to dodge on the fly for pretty much the whole game. Everything comes toward you at lightning speed and in large numbers, so being able to dodge everything pushes the limits of human reaction time. According to one source I found on the internet, the game's publisher, Renovation, pushed for the developer to make the game hard. Their thinking was that if someone beat the game quickly, they would be able to resell it, which would cut into the company's retail sales. The developer complied, and then showed the game to Renovation. Renovation then said, let's make it even harder. The developer became concerned that the game was becoming too hard, but they complied anyway. That explains why there's no easy mode on the options screen. There are, however, a large number of cheats built into the game. After 3 failed playthrough attempts, and only being able to reach the beginning of stage 3, I became desperate enough to start using the cheats. Here's the first one. If you fire your pod and miss 6 times in a row, and then latch onto an enemy the 7th time, you'll get a destructive homing weapon. It clears most enemies the second they enter the screen. Some enemies can still fire their projectiles before dying, and the bosses are still on the screen long enough to cause you trouble, but for the most part the game becomes very easy with this weapon firing, at least until you reach the end of the stage. After that you have to perform the cheat again. In later stages it's a challenge to miss 6 times, so the cheat becomes harder to implement the further you go into the game. Also, if you accidentally miscount and miss 7 times, you can't do the trick until after you die or finish the stage. At least I couldn't get it to work. With the homing weapon as my only cheat, I attempted 2 more playthroughs, and I managed to get to stage 5 1 time. This game is so hard. This incline near the end of stage 4 has so much going on that the special weapon can't keep up. Bear in mind this is only the halfway point of the game. There are 8 stages. So with that in mind, I did 1 more attempted playthrough using another cheat, invincibility. I also used a stage select to jump directly to stage 4. From there I got all the way to the beginning of stage 8. After that, the invincibility code seemed to stop working for me. I don't know how I could have functioned without the cheats. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is that your ship has 3 speeds. There are certain parts of the game which can't be passed unless you're at maximum speed. Dying a lot makes the game feel repetitive since you're having to see the same areas multiple times. The most repetitive portion for me was this part where the water fills the screen. It has some silly background music. I went through this part so many times that music got stuck in my head, and I was hearing it way after I turned the game off. All the talk about the difficulty aside, this is a gorgeous game, as you might have already noticed. It utilizes 8 megabits of memory. The standard at the time for the Genesis was 4. There are multiple layers of parallax scrolling in the backgrounds. There are sharp looking details in the foregrounds, 8 minutes of cutscenes before you even begin the game, and end bosses so large that you'll shimmer when you first see them. I like the fact that many of the bosses are giant humanoids. Their expressions give you this sense that they really want to kill you. There was never any slowdown in the game. Somebody should have received an award for programming this game. The background tunes are as stunning as the graphics, all except for that tune that got stuck in my head. The bottom line is, the game leaves a huge impression, whether you played it decades ago or whether you play it today. For those who have played Thunder Force 3, you should consider Gaiares a fraternal twin to it. The pacing, boss battles, and stage designs have a lot in common. If you like one game, you'll like the other, although most people would find Thunder Force 3 a lot easier. I would sum up Gaiares with 2 words: polished and impossible. I give it a 7 out of 10. If you are more skilled than me, or just a masochist, you should bump up the score. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video.